How Dictatorships Work, Power, Personalization, and Collapse by Joseph Wright, Barbara Geddes, and Erica Frantz is a comprehensive analysis of authoritarian regimes and the dynamics that govern their rise, survival, and eventual collapse. The book explores how dictatorships operate by focusing on three central themes: the role of power in authoritarian systems, the personalization of power, and the reasons behind the downfall of dictatorships. The authors utilize a combination of theoretical frameworks and empirical evidence to provide a detailed understanding of how dictatorships maintain control, the mechanisms of personal rule, and the factors that lead to regime failure. Power and the mechanics of dictatorships. The first major theme the authors tackle is the nature of power in authoritarian regimes. Unlike democracies, where power is more diffused among various institutions, dictatorships are characterized by centralized power. This centralization allows for quicker decision-making and more direct control over resources and policy. However, the authors note that such concentration of power creates vulnerabilities, particularly in terms of regime stability. The rulers of these regimes typically rely on a core group of elites and institutions to maintain their grip on power. These elites, often military officers, business leaders, or bureaucrats, provide the necessary support for the dictator's rule. This elite coalition is essential because it prevents potential challengers from gaining access to the power structures needed to overthrow the regime. The authors explain that the way power is distributed within a dictatorship plays a crucial role in determining how vulnerable the regime is to external pressures or internal challenges. For instance, in a highly personalized dictatorship, where the dictator's power is closely tied to his or her individual control, the regime's stability may be more fragile. If the dictator's personal hold on power weakens, the entire system can collapse. On the other hand, in a more institutionalized dictatorship, where power is spread across multiple figures or organizations, the regime may be more resilient to individual challenges. Personalization of power. One of the book's key arguments revolves around the concept of the personalization of power in dictatorships. Personalization occurs when the dictator becomes the central figure in the political system, and the regime's survival is heavily dependent on that individual's authority and decision-making. This contrasts with more institutionalized forms of authoritarianism, where power is shared among elites or spread across several institutions. The authors argue that personalist regimes, where the dictator holds most of the power and decision-making authority, are more prone to instability. This is because the dictator's power is fragile and can easily be challenged if the leader's health, popularity, or political skill wanes. The book discusses the consequences of personalization for both the dictator and the regime. On one hand, personalist dictatorships can be highly effective in terms of decision-making. The dictator has direct control over policy and the enforcement of decisions, which can lead to rapid changes and reforms. However, this concentration of power also increases the risk of instability, as it depends on the dictator's ability to maintain control over the elites and prevent challenges from within the system. If the dictator loses the support of key elites, the entire regime can collapse. The authors also note that personalism can create a form of patrimonialism, where the dictator treats state resources as personal property, rewarding loyal supporters with access to wealth and power. This can lead to the creation of a system where corruption is rampant and state institutions are undermined in favor of the dictator's personal interests. Over time, this system can erode the foundations of the regime, making it more vulnerable to collapse. Collapse of dictatorships. The collapse of dictatorships is another central focus of the book. The authors examine the various factors that contribute to the fall of authoritarian regimes. They argue that while there is no single reason for the collapse of dictatorships, certain conditions make regimes more prone to failure. One of these conditions is the erosion of elite support. As dictators rely on the loyalty of key elites to maintain power, any loss of support from these groups can lead to instability. If the elites begin to see the dictator as an unreliable partner, they may defect and align with opposition forces or even attempt to overthrow the regime. Another key factor in the collapse of dictatorships is the economic performance of the regime. Economic crises, such as severe inflation, unemployment, or a decline in living standards, can trigger mass protests and dissatisfaction with the regime. If the regime is unable to address these economic grievances, or if the economy collapses altogether, it can lead to the downfall of the dictatorship. The book also highlights the role of social movements and popular uprisings in the collapse of authoritarian regimes. When the public becomes disillusioned with the regime, protests and demands for political change can gain traction. In some cases, these protests may lead to the downfall of the dictator. The authors also emphasize the role of external factors in the collapse of dictatorships. International pressure, whether through sanctions, diplomatic isolation, or military intervention, can weaken a regime and contribute to its downfall. In some cases, foreign actors may support opposition movements or provide assistance to those seeking to overthrow the dictator. The collapse of dictatorships can also be linked to the spread of democratic ideals, as external actors promote the idea of democratization and support movements that aim to bring about political change. Authoritarian resilience and regime survival. Despite the vulnerabilities associated with personalist regimes, the authors also argue that authoritarian regimes can be remarkably resilient, particularly in certain contexts. They identify factors that contribute to the long-term survival of dictatorships, such as the ability to co-opt opposition groups, maintain elite loyalty, and effectively manage economic and social crises. Dictatorships that can successfully manage these factors may endure for long periods, even in the face of significant challenges. The authors stress that authoritarian resilience is not inevitable. It depends on the dictator's ability to manage the political system, address economic issues, and suppress opposition. In some cases, dictators may implement reforms to strengthen the regime or consolidate power. However, these strategies are not always successful, and many regimes eventually face collapse when they can no longer adapt to changing circumstances. Theoretical contributions and conclusion. How Dictatorships Work provides a significant theoretical contribution to the study of authoritarianism. The book offers a nuanced understanding of the dynamics of dictatorship, moving beyond simplistic explanations of regime survival or collapse. By focusing on the personalization of power, the role of elites, and the factors that contribute to regime failure, the authors present a more complex picture of how dictatorships operate and why they ultimately collapse. The book's conclusions are valuable for understanding not only the collapse of specific regimes, but also the broader patterns of authoritarian rule. It provides insights into the conditions that foster the rise of dictatorships, the mechanisms that allow them to maintain power, and the reasons for their eventual downfall. The author's approach combines empirical data with theoretical insights, offering a comprehensive analysis of authoritarian regimes and their inner workings. In sum, Wright, Geddes, and Frantz offer a compelling framework for understanding how dictatorships operate and why they fail. Their analysis highlights the crucial role of power dynamics, personalization of authority, and the challenges of maintaining elite loyalty in authoritarian systems. While dictatorships may appear resilient in the short term, their reliance on personalized power and elite support makes them inherently unstable and prone to collapse. This book provides valuable insights into the mechanics of dictatorship and contributes to the broader field of political science by offering a detailed examination of one of the most enduring forms of political rule.